Here's what some people are saying about the Projection Booth podcast.
The Projection Booth is single-handedly the greatest film podcast you could ever listen to or could possibly want.
Top notch. 5 stars. This has quickly become one of my favorite film-related podcasts. Always interesting.
A completely unpretentious yet fully comprehensive look at films from all genres.
The Projection Booth podcast, with new episodes available every week at projectionboothpodcast.com.
You are listening to the In the Mouth of Dorkness podcast. Here are Brad and Darren.
Welcome to another edition of the ITMODScast podcast. With me is Brad Gullickson, Mouth Dork.
Hello!
Yep, and I'm your host, Darren Smith, the Disco Dork, and welcome to the ITMODSpotlight, Bruce Lee. We are at our final episode.
Sad.
So bittersweet. Yeah. We've talked about his first film, The Big Boss. Second film, Fist of Fury, a.k.a. Chinese Connection. Third film, Way of the Dragon, a.k.a. Return of the Dragon. We talked about Game of Death. Yikes. And now we are at Enter the Dragon.
Man.
Yeah.
Almost 2 months of Bruce Lee conversation between the two of us.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, like Game of Death, this is a film that you've seen before, correct?
I've seen this one several times.
Yes. This is a film that I've seen several times. That may be an understatement. I've watched Enter the Dragon more than any other Bruce Lee's films. It is my favorite Bruce Lee film. So having these discussions and then, watching the films and having the discussions and then watching the next film, this go around has affected each watch for me. Having that discussion after watching Fist of Fury really changed my perception of it. I found, talking to you and the delight that you found in that film really made my affinity for it grow. So I had a new appreciation for Fist of Fury, and then even watching Way of the Dragon, like that discussion. Our discussions leading into Game of Death. If you have not listened to the last episode, if you have, you would know that. Also affected my attempted watch of that film, and I thought that at the end of that episode I was like, you know what, Enter the Dragon used to be my favorite Bruce Lee film, but after having these discussions and that watch of Fist of Fury, like I'm curious to see if that has changed.
Well, we posed that question at the end of that conversation on Fist of Fury.
Yeah,
I mean, we both really loved that watch.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious also going into the Dragon.
Yeah. So I guess we should answer that question at the end of this discussion, right?
I can answer it right this second.
Let's do it.
Enter the Dragon is amazing.
Yeah.
It's a great film.
Yeah,
it's
is
awesome.
Yeah, it's a perfect film to me.
It's the ultimate Bruce Lee movie.
Yeah. So I'm watching it, right? And it's been a while since I've seen it, but I'm watching it, like the opening happens, and I'm like, oh man, this is so good. And then like the introduction of Jim Kelly's Williams and John Saxon's Roper, and how, they're piecing all these people together before we get to the island. And I go, oh man, this is so good. I don't know. Yeah, I liked Fist of Fury a lot this time. Really, really liked it, but I don't think I like it better than Enter the Dragon. And Enter the Dragon just kept going, and it just kept happening, and it just kept being what it was. It just kept being great and just getting better and better. And then at the end, I was like, nah, Enter the Dragon's still my favorite.
Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously the first thing you notice when you press play is the Warner Brothers logo,
Yep.
The classic 70s black and red logo.
Yeah.
This is a different beast than the films we've talked about before. This is an American production. Mm-hmm. And, part of me, the hipster side of me, wants to be like, yeah, but the Hong Kong films are more pure, But honestly, this is the only film in which you get to hear Bruce Lee, his voice, and outside of the pagoda scene of Game of Death, this is the film that most directly reflects the philosophy of Bruce Lee.
So you watched that extended one.
Well, yeah, I mean, I suppose so. I don't know which cut I just watched.
So after his opening fight with Sammo Hung, he's taken off to the side and he's speaking with an abbot,
right?
Shaolin.
Uh-huh.
You saw that version?
That's the version I saw.
So the theatrical cut doesn't have that.
Oh, that's interesting.
It doesn't have that. There's some scenes, and we'll as we get to them in the discussion, I'll point out.
I don't think I've ever seen the theatrical cut then. I've always seen the cut with the priest.
That scene's not in the theatrical. For the longest time, I would say up until the last 5 years, that the theatrical cut, this version we watched, I had not seen it. So up until the last 5 years, a version without a lot of these scenes was the only version of Enter the Dragon I knew.
Interesting. Because I first discovered this film about 5 years ago when that double disc Blu-ray or DVD came out. And then I've seen it a couple times at the Alamo and one time at the AFI, if I remember correctly. This film has Lee addressing his philosophy, working out his philosophy. After that opening bout, that sparring match with Sammo Hung, which is awesome. And I was thinking, at the end of our Game of Death conversation, how the only representation of Bruce Lee I have in this home is a yellow jumpsuit action figure. The figure I want now is the ripped, 6-pack Bruce Lee wearing the black boxing gloves, wearing the black trunks and the black boots. That's now my image of Bruce Lee.
So when that scene happens, so back in the beginning, the first episode when we talked about the Big Boss, at the end of the Big Boss, there's a scene where Bruce Lee's shirt is ripped and he rips it off, and you talked about when you first saw that, like how ripped he was. And I remember remarking, like, yeah, he's a specimen, but like he's gonna get more cut up than that. And I was looking forward to getting to this scene in Enter the Dragon, because you think about how in shape he was in Fist of Fury, but when you look at his body in that opening scene in Enter the Dragon,
he looks like he's sculpted.
He really does. Like you see every muscle definition possible in a human body on Bruce Lee.
Looks like a comic book character.
He really does.
And not the goofy one that Mr. Han is referred to as by Jim Kelly later in the film.
There's not an ounce of fat on his body at this point in Bruce Lee's life. It's incredible. It really is incredible. And that, in and of itself, it may go right over a lot of people's heads, but there is a thing where he talks about in his philosophy about attaining physical peak performance for the benefit of being able to push oneself in your martial art to be most efficient and in top form, and to be most effective in your art.
And I love what a specimen he is to the monks that are watching him.
Oh yeah,
right. This is a sparring match. It's an exercise. It's a showcase for skill between him and Sammo Hung. And it climaxes. He defeats Sammo Hung. He taps out. And then the monks raise, there's like a group of black robed monks, and they raise their arms high in the air, and they don't taunt him, but they encourage him to perform a feat of strength. And Bruce Lee does this somersault right over their hands, like 6 feet in the air. And their response to that act of aerobics is pure joy.
Yeah.
The smiles on those monks' faces,
yeah.
They're just thrilled to be in the presence of this being. And it's just a really great way to start this film off, especially coming off of the conversations that we've had for the last 6 weeks.
And you got to think, for this being his first film in Hollywood, this would be a lot of Western audiences' first exposure to Bruce Lee. So someone's first time seeing this man, this is their first impression of him. Firstly, but for people who would already know him and see his other films, thinking back on his other fight scenes in his other films, he takes down Sammo Hung. As you said, he makes him tap out. In this Enter the Dragon, this is our first time seeing Bruce Lee using grappling and ground techniques that he doesn't usually use before. Now,
That's interesting. I didn't even think about that.
And acrobatic-wise, this feat of strength that he shows these monks, we never see Bruce Lee in other his older films. they would use those movie techniques where someone would jump out of a tree and then they would just reverse that to have them jump up in the air. They would do things like that. Bruce Lee's never shown his pure acrobatic ability like he did in Enter the Dragon. When he did that somersault, he did like a 2 or 3 flip somersault over these guys' hands and landed. That was Bruce Lee. Like, he did that himself. And so, again, for people who would know him, this is something new that we would see him do. But also, back to what I was saying, this is a Western audience's first introduction to this friggin', unique human being.
And that's, how the character is introduced.
Mm-hmm.
He is, a pure athlete, right?
Mm-hmm.
He is, and the idea of, well, what is going to oppose this being is exciting unto itself.
Mm-hmm.
Great way to start the film, really.
Yeah.
And then you have this conversation between him and the abbot, and the abbot says, well, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and just, to hear your responses. And he asks, I think the first question is, what is your technique? And then his response is, well, to have no technique. There is no opponent. A good fight should be a small play, but played seriously. And then, when the opponent expands, I contract. And so you have like this quick succession of philosophy and concepts. And it would be interesting to be robbed of those now in the theatrical cut. What a tremendous disappointment that would be. And this is also when you start to get the narrative as well. The abbot asks him to repeat Shaolin Commandment 13, and that's, you must take responsibility for oneself and accept the consequences of their actions. And that leads into this conversation about a former student, Han. He's gone off reservation. He's disgraced the temple, and his abbot has sent him on a quest to reclaim the honor for the Shaolin monks. And that's, the vessel that Bruce Lee is at the start of this film. So unlike, say, The Big Boss or Fist of Fury or Way of the Dragon, his mission from the onset is honorable and is one of honor. Now, being an American movie, they find a way to also put in a revenge subplot. But we'll get to that in a second. He talks about needing emotional content in your fighting when he before he leaves his temple. He has a conversation with one of his students. The Hong Kong, the British ambassador has come to the temple. He wants to talk to him about Mr. Han and how Mr. Han has been doping up these white girls and letting them wash up in the beaches. And we can't allow that. Once white girls start dying, now we have to be involved. So the British government has to come in. And could you be our spy on Han's island? But while he's having this conversation with this ambassador type, this G-Man character, he ends that conversation. He's like, really, I see where you're coming from, but I don't care. My abbot sent me on this mission, but I need to make sure that my guys are okay, that the people I've been talking and training with are going to be okay while I'm away. And I need to make sure that their psychology, their philosophy is being steered straight. And how that philosophy all stems from physical contact or physicality, the martial arts. And that conversation stems from, you attack me, take a kick. And don't kick with anger. You have to have emotional content if we're going to have a true exchange, a true fight played seriously.
Yes. And he says, okay, after a few tries, he gets it right. He says, okay, now tell me, how did that feel to you? And the guy says, let me think. He says, don't think, feel. And he makes a gesture. He says, it's like a finger pointing away to the moon. And the student is looking at his finger. And he says, slaps him again. Don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all that heavenly glory. So my question to you is, going back to our previous discussions and looking at that unreleased footage of Game of Death and how you were saying your interest in watching these films, one of the things you were looking at is, after having read up on Bruce Lee and listened to some of the podcasts covering him and his philosophies, you were interested in finding the philosophies in his day-to-day life philosophies and how he would implement those into his characters. And then as we go through his filmography, how you would become to see that more and more. So my question to you is, having already seen Enter the Dragon a few times, but now after having gone through this ITMODSpotlight with his filmography and then becoming more aware of his philosophies, how was this viewing now, seeing and hearing these philosophies after becoming made so more aware of them and being cognitive of looking for them during this watch?
Well, if I'm to be honest, when I had watched this film previously, and like I said, I've seen it several times, and I know I saw it in my youth, so I must have seen it a theatrical cut, but my memory now is all, it includes all the Abbott stuff in the beginning. When those scenes happened, I would watch them the way I would watch, David Carradine in Kung Fu, grasshopper stuff. And I liked it as like, this fun Zen Buddhism concepts that are being played around with here. Yeah. That's part of the kitsch factor. Right. That's how I used to watch Enter the Dragon. Right. Watching it now, that is what's steering my interest with Bruce Lee as a human being, Bruce Lee as an actor, Bruce Lee as an icon. So that scene in particular with the Abbot, I watched it twice. I watched it once just to take it in, and then I watched it in anticipation of how these concepts of no technique and later on fighting without fighting would play on through the rest of the film. And it being a Warner Brothers movie, and Bruce Lee still having to adhere to the theatrics of the day, I don't think we ever got the ultimate Bruce Lee philosophy action film. Right. We may have gotten that in the original Game of Death. Right. We'll never know. Enter the Dragon explores the concepts in a more pure fashion, but ultimately is still action. Action is still its highest pursuit. Right. And of course you get the revenge plot coming in, which makes things a little more complicated. Getting that attached to the honor concept. And then you also have John Saxon and Jim Kelly coming on board too, to distract from the headier subjects that Bruce Lee wanted to explore. Right.
So what are your thoughts about those two characters being in addition to Bruce Lee?
So before we get to that, what I love so much about the opening is it truly is a prologue. You're being introduced to Lee as a character, and he is called Lee also, right? Yeah, he's Lee. And you're getting his mission. You're seeing his teachings. You're seeing his teacher. You're seeing his student. You're getting a large picture of his. You're getting his entire point of view, and then it snaps to Lalo Schifrin's screaming score, which incorporates the battle cry into this very funky 70s theme song, which is awesome. Yeah. And that prologue is like a good 10 minutes before you get to the credit scene. And the credits is just great. Yeah. Like we talked about last episode how much I love John Barry's James Bond score for Game of Death. But Lalo Schifrin's score is the coolest soundtrack we've been given in these 5 films, without a doubt. And it made me just go like, I got to go watch Dirty Harry again. I need more Lalo Schifrin in my life.
It's a great score.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and especially starting off that movie. And I think part of the reason why it was cut, that opening is cut for the theatrical release, is because how powerful that score is. It just opens up, bam, and you got, like you said, you got Bruce Lee's battle cry. It just hits the ground running right there, and it kind of sets a tone. Like that music and that mood sets a tone, especially with like Bruce Lee and his battle cries in it. Because the theatrical cut is the Sammo Hung fight. He jumps over the monks. He meets with the British guy, and then after he smacks the guy. Don't never take your eyes off your opponent, even when you bow. And the guy says, and he bows. He says, "That's it, that's it." And the student leaves. Boom, bam, enter the dragon. Dun,
Does it have the
dun,
moon?
Dun.
Does it have the heavenly body line?
Yeah.
Okay,
He says don't. He says that first, and then after he smacks him on the head, don't concentrate on the finger or you.
So the only thing missing is the abbot.
Is they take out that whole speech, yeah, and then after the student leaves, they cut to enter the dragon.
And, you know, that title sequence introduced John Saxon's name right next to Bruce Lee's name, letting you know this is still an American movie, folks.
Yeah.
We have a white guy.
Yeah.
And then over the score and the credits, you're introduced to Jim Kelly stepping off of the plane. He steps off the plane, immediately puts shades on.
Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah.
You're introduced to John Saxon on the back of a rickshaw, going through the city, making their way to the port.
And that over that title sequence, that credit sequence, that location where they're shooting in that the boat city, the boat ghetto, whatever, that is just a rich and great location. I watching it this time on the Blu-ray and like sitting really close to that big ass TV I got, like I was really paying attention to the detail and the texture of that location, and it's just so rich and authentic. Like I love it.
This is when you meet up with the British agent again. He talks about Bob Wall, the bodyguard of Mr. Han, Mr. Scarface there.
Yeah.
He talks about the fact that there's no guns on this island because Han was... there was an assassination attempt on his life. He was disgusted with guns, so he would never have guns around him.
Yeah.
So it sets up the fact that on this island, it's going to be a place of physical combat, not machine gun fire.
Right.
So I appreciate that, certainly. Good setup.
Yep.
It's like the in horror films now where they have to get rid of the cell phones. Bruce Lee movies have to find a way to get rid of the guns, except for Way of the Dragon, as we talked about.
Yep.
And like I like in that scene too, because even the British guy seems to be kind of disgusted with firearms. So and this is when he also meets up with a family member, like an uncle, or is he a friend of the family?
Yes, he's a family member.
Okay, and that's when you learn that his sister was on the trail of Han and was attacked by Bob Wall's henchmen and was murdered. Well, actually, she had her ass kicked, and you have a pretty good fight scene here with Bruce Lee's sister.
And then his sister's played by Angela Mao, who is a huge star in her own right in Hong Kong kung fu cinema. That's Lady Whirlwind. She's done a ton of like kung fu movies.
Yeah, this is not a damsel in distress sequence.
No.
Now she does lose the battle, and before she's about to be either raped or murdered, she grabs a piece of glass and she kills herself in front of Bob Wall.
Yeah.
And so and Bruce Lee learns of this story, and now Bruce Lee has a revenge motivation on top of the honor motivation.
Yeah.
I kind of wish this element wasn't in the film.
Yeah.
Although I do like when he goes to his mom's grave and his sister's grave and he talks to them and says, look, what I'm about to do you would not approve of, but I have to do it. So that's a very Western concept. Easy for us to hang our narrative on, our narrative hat on. I probably would prefer it just to be the story of reclaiming the honor of the Shaolin Temple, but what are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's the 70s.
Yeah.
It's a John Saxon movie, too.
Yep.
And then that's, flashes. Now that's kind of done as a flashback, right? And then you meet John Saxon, and he's on a boat about to get onto the larger boat that's going to take him to Han's Island.
So everybody's backstory is done via flashback. They're all on these boats on their way to the island, And so while they're making their way to the big boat, you get a flashback for each character.
And so, again, the first time you see John Saxon, he's on that rickshaw. The second time you see John Saxon, he's on this tiny little boat, and he's surrounded in luggage. All his luggage. He must have like 20 pieces of luggage.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And then you get his flashback, and his flashback's on a golf course, and he's wearing this turtleneck. And you learn that he owes some mobsters some money, and he does not have the money to pay for it.
No.
So he's got to get out of Dodge.
Yeah, he's got a gambling problem.
He's got a severe gambling problem. And you also meet his secretary at that point in that flashback, and it's Marlene Clark. She's from Slaughter. It's like, oh shit, Slaughter. And she's in it for like 3 seconds and then gone.
Yeah.
And then you get Jim Kelly's flashback. He's basically like Cobra Kai in L.A. somewhere. He's part of the Black Kung Fu experience, and he's already in the process of going to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
I guess Han's tournament it's like Mortal Kombat.
It's like
Mortal Kombat is ripped off Enter the Dragon.
It really is. Yep.
It's a straight up ripoff. And he wants to partake in this epic event. But while he's getting his stuff together, 2 racist asshole LAPD officers get in his way, and Jim Kelly devastates them and steals their car.
Fuck you, the man. Yeah, he gets into the man, steals a cop car.
And so that's the that's their backstory.
Yeah,
Jim Kelly and John Saxon meet up on the boat. You realize that they had some sort of past history.
They were buddies in Nam.
Yeah, they're Nam buddies.
Yeah.
And they're super happy to see each other. And Jim Kelly mocks John Saxon for all the luggage he has at one point.
Yeah.
And you're immediately, one, I love John Saxon. He doesn't feel like he belongs in this film necessarily. Jim Kelly feels like he belongs.
Yeah.
But John Saxon, you're like, what's this guy's story?
But
that being said, on the golf course, that fight scene he has, it's a pretty badass fight.
His fight later on with the guy when he's placing the bet, when he's throwing the fight, like that's a pretty decent. John Saxon is good in Enter the Dragon.
He agreed 100%, and it's not like he has a stunt double in his action sequences.
No, he's fighting.
Those are his moves.
Yeah.
This is the 70s. They don't have time to cut away to the body doubles.
Right. He was good. So they meet on the boat, and as they're on their way to the island, you have this guy from New Zealand who's another combatant in the tournament.
A real asshole.
And he's bullying the Chinese people on the boat, and Bruce Lee sees this, and so he steps up for the people of China, and we have a bit of his philosophy of the art of fighting without fighting, in which he bests this guy with his brain instead of his physicality. And I thought that's pretty Bruce Lee.
I mean, that's a classic moment. Anytime you're talking about Bruce Lee movies, you have to show that clip.
Yeah, to show that man was more than just about punching somebody. Like if you can a way out of no way, if you can best your opponent without exerting yourself, without resorting to violence, then yes, do that. By all
That's
means.
his one punch in this scene, right?
Yep.
Idiot.
Yeah, and it's awesome. It's so fun. And then when he hands the rope off to the kids, and they're just so happy. And again, that's their champion, and I really love that moment. So finally, they make their way to the island, to Han's island.
Yeah, and Han has this massive feast that he is putting on for the combatants of the tournament. And Jim Kelly can't keep any of the Chinese food down.
No.
He's like, oh.
No.
Where are all these noodles?
So I'm looking at this particular scene, and it is a feast, like in the truest sense. You got 2 sumo wrestlers in the middle. The place where they're in, it's kind of circular, and so everyone is sitting on the peripheral, on the outside, and they have dancers in the middle and sumo wrestlers in the middle. People walking around with cages with exotic animals for display, and I mean it's really lavish. And as a set piece, like it's pretty spectacular. I really like the detail in it.
I love that set. I love all the sets on Han's Island.
Oh, man.
Interior and exterior.
Yeah.
I love Han. This is the first time we meet
He comes
him.
in, yeah.
And, he has this speech to the crowd where he says, we are unique gentlemen because we create ourselves. And that puts him in a mental state akin to Lee. That he is also about perfection and looking inward to increase your worth, right? Now, there's a diabolical edge to Han, of course.
Right.
And it comes off pretty clear from that feast, the opulence of it.
Yeah.
You begin to feel like you've also just walked onto a James Bond movie as well.
Yeah.
He feels like a Bond villain in a lot of ways. It feels like a Bond villain's lair, certainly.
Yeah.
As you explore the depths in particular. And he has his fembots too, his ladies.
Yeah.
They all have dagger earrings, and he puts them on display to show you their skills.
Yeah.
He's very proud of what he has built and created here on this island. This is his kingdom. This is his country.
Yeah. So then we have a scene where the guests are gifted some women the night before.
Jim Kelly, again, so great.
Yeah.
This parade of ladies is brought before him, and he's like, "Oh, for me, you shouldn't have, but I'll take you, darling, and you, and you, and you." It's just so.
And then he says, "You got to forgive me if I missed anyone. I've had a long day and I'm tired." And then she goes, "Of course you are, Mr. Williams."
And John Saxon is offered the opportunity for some ladies as well, but he's more interested in the madam.
Yeah, yeah.
The villainous madam.
Yeah.
And then they offer Lee some ladies as well, but he refuses them. He's
mission focused.
He's mission focused. Yeah.
Yeah.
He wants to see the woman from before with the earring.
Who threw the dart.
Yeah, through the dart. Yeah.
So I'm trying to think, she's brought to his office before the next day, correct? Because she comes in and she informs him of the goings on the island. So she's a mole, I guess, sort of. And so she instructs him to look, I don't know what's going on. I just know girls come to the island, but they don't leave. And, he's doing something, bad here. And so the next day we have the first day of the tournament.
And everyone has to wear these uniforms. There's like the yellow uniform or the white uniform, and Lee refuses.
Yeah.
He comes out all in black.
Yeah.
And again, what's interesting about the Hong Kong movies is Lee would often wear white as a symbol of like, get ready, I'm going to kick ass because I am death, destroyer of worlds, you know.
Yeah.
But here he is all in black.
Well, on that morning, that suit was brown.
Is it brown?
He had a brown suit on that morning. Yeah, it's a dark brown suit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not white and
No.
it's not yellow.
It's not.
It sets him apart. He definitely sticks out in the crowd.
Because he's not wearing a traditional gi, martial arts gi. Everyone else is. Bruce Lee's wearing his own clothes.
And this is also when you're introduced to the guy from Big Trouble in Little China, Bolo.
Yes, but he is not in Big Trouble in Little China. He is in Double Impact, and
He's not big. He's not. Big
no,
Trouble?
he's not in.
He's
Big
not one of
Trouble.
the three storms.
No,
I am so racist.
That is Carter one. It's okay, but he is in Double Impact. He's in a bunch of films. He was starring a bunch of Hong Kong films, but he's mostly known for Enter the Dragon. But yes, that's when you're first introduced to him. But we don't see him fight in this scene. He's the one that's kind of like, I don't want to say the referee. He's just calling out the next opponent.
This isn't the scene where he squishes all those guys?
No, because this happens after the first round of the tournament. Because Jim Kelly goes outside and Bruce Lee sneaks his way around the compound. But this is the first time we see John Saxon fight. This is the first time we see Jim Kelly fight. And then we see them doing their little side betting and their gambling. And then this is when
they have like an interesting relationship, John Saxon and Bruce Lee. It's a playful, kind of antagonistic, but also respectful.
Yeah.
And they're a lot of fun together.
And I thought that was cool that it's not your typical, I don't like that guy. Who are you? We're going to be at odds, and then we're going to be friends by the end of the movie. Like, I like that it doesn't play out how you think. But anyway, after the first round of the tournament that night, Jim Kelly, he's back with his women, and he after he's done pleasing his women, he goes for outside for a breath of fresh air. One of the women tell him, hey, you can't go outside. It's forbidden. And he's like, I'm going to do what I want. And then at the same time, Bruce Lee he uses this opportunity to go snoop out the compound. And that's when he makes his way. He finds out there's a lower level. He sneaks around, but then something happens and he has to leave. But Han finds out the next day that, some of his guards were beat up and someone was sneaking around. And so that's when you have the scene with Bolo. He says, who it was is not important. What is important is that my men were operating not to standard, and we need to fix this shit in front of everybody. And so that's when Bolo comes out, takes his shirt off, and is the biggest Chinese man ever.
Yep.
And he literally crushes these dudes. Man, that is hard way to go out, man.
And Bolo has such an insane smile.
Oh man,
in on his face. Not
it's
just
madness.
Not just his teeth. It's the combination of his eyebrows, his white eyes, and that rictus grin.
Yeah, it's like madness in his face. Like he's relishing it and literally crushing this guy in his arms like a baby. It's sad. It is so awesome. So anyway, that's when the next round of the tournament is, and that's when Bruce Lee has his match with Bob Wall. So this is his moment where he's facing the guy that forced his sister to kill herself.
Well, I remembered this scene, certainly, and now that I knew who Bob Wall was going into this fight, I was anticipating it even more. And I was like, well, I thought, like, oh, did this come at the end? No, this is coming kind of, like, the third act hasn't even started. And this is going to be an epic fight, Bob Wall versus Bruce Lee. And it is epic in its own right, and how easily Lee dispatches Wall's character.
You got to think, this is a Western audience's first exposure to Bruce Lee, so they might not necessarily have that history of, oh shit, I've seen him in 2 other films. This is the 3rd time. Let's see how they go at it this time. This is showcasing, okay, this is a new talent, a new star, Bruce Lee. Watch how fast this man is. Because if you look at that, when they square up, when Bob Wall and Bruce Lee come face to face and they square up and they do that thing where they each put their hand out and they cross wrists, and the guy says, go, he gives the mark. You see Bruce Lee punch the guy, right?
It's like lightning.
Okay. A lot of people don't know this. I point this out to a lot of people. So the way Bruce is holding his hands and the way Bob Wall is holding his hands, Bruce Lee in this moment is using Wing Chun. So in Wing Chun, when you have your hands positioned the way that Bruce has his hands, the hand that's out, what that's used to do is guide the wrist down. So the guy who's going to punch you, you move that hand down, and then you use your hand that's back to move forward. So you're punching in a straight line. When you watch Enter the Dragon and that guy yells go, you see Bruce Lee punch. All you see is Bruce Lee punch. If you go frame by frame, that's the only time you'll notice that Bruce Lee takes his other hand, takes Bob Wall's hand, moves it down out of the way so he can punch him. It happens so fast, you don't even notice
I never noticed it.
But it's caught on camera, but you have to go frame by frame to see it. It's nuts. But it's in real time. And when you watch the film, it's not like they speed the camera up. Like, it just happens in real time. That's how fast he is. That's why that urban legend, those rumors of when he was filming Green Hornet, they had to slow it down because his movements weren't being caught on camera because he was so fast. Well, it's happening right there. You don't even see Bruce's is he using his? You don't even see his left hand move. You catch him punch with the right. It's insanely fast. It's nuts.
I want to stop this podcast and watch it now.
It's nuts. So yeah, this is the moment where he gets his revenge for his sister. So Bob Wall's character, he doesn't end up fighting honorably.
Yeah. So he's embarrassed, right? Because he is struck, I think, 3 times. It's definitely twice. He struck twice.
Bruce Lee does a couple spin kicks.
Yeah.
He gets pissed, tries to jump kick. Bruce goes down, hits him straight in the nuts.
Yep. Because you can't have a Bruce Lee movie without a dude getting punched in the nuts.
So at this point, he's frustrated, but it's over. Like Bruce is like, all right, I'm going to bow to the refs, and I'm calling it quits.
And Bob Wall goes for his leg.
Yes.
And,
oh yeah.
And I love. He's like, I'm gonna pull this guy down to my level or do something. And Bruce Lee propels himself skyward from that leg pull. It's an awesome move.
Yeah. And then he does that. He does his running side kick, which is a very powerful kick that Bruce uses in demonstrations all the time.
And he knocks him into the crowd. They scatter the chairs.
He breaks one of those guys that Bob Wall falls into, gets his arm broken from the impact. Bruce Lee actually kicks Bob Wall. The force propels him back so hard that one of those guys got their arm broken.
Shit.
Yeah. So
ouch.
That's pretty hard.
And then you have, another then you have Bob Wall. He grabs some bottles on the ground, smashes them, and he goes after him with the shards.
And so what I like about this fight, though, is throughout all this, like when Bob Wall goes to grab Bruce Lee's foot, you hear Han call his name out. What was Bob Wall's name? God damn it.
O'Hara.
O'Hara, yes. He grabs Bruce Lee's leg. You hear Han call out O'Hara, like, dude, chill out. And then Bruce Lee whips his ass again. And then when he grabs those bottles again, Han again calls out O'Hara. And so it's real short. I mean, you don't have to, if you don't think about it, then it's nothing. But for me, like, I like that Han is trying to keep his guy in check. He's trying to maintain some type of dignity and uprightness about this tournament, at least. Regardless of what's going on, the heroin manufacturing downstairs or opium or whatever, like up here, like we have rules and you're going to abide by these rules and don't disgrace us. Because when he does grab those bottles and smash them together to break them, Bruce Lee finishes them off.
So what's interesting, what I love about this scene is in the background, there's like, there's a bunch of guys in white jumpsuits and there's this one guy in a yellow jumpsuit.
I know you're going to say, in his face.
He's got some serious side eye that he is giving Bob Wall, and he knows that Bob Wall is going to get murdered.
Yeah. And then when Bruce Lee jumps up in the air, there's that one guy who's like, it's like he's seeing that shit for real. Yeah. It's like, dude, give that guy an Oscar. Like, he's the best.
And then, Bob Wall's collapsed on the ground, and Bruce Lee does this like hop stomp, where he propels himself in the air and lands, I'm assuming, on Bob Wall's neck or skull and crushes him. And it's this slow motion close up of Lee's face screaming. It's all ferociousness.
I love that bit of acting from him.
I mean, honestly, it's one of those scenes when you watch YouTube compilations of Bruce Lee that, you're going to get Bruce Lee in the jumpsuit from the pagoda. You're going to get Bruce Lee at the end of this film in the Hall of Mirrors with the slashes on his body. And you're going to get this moment, this expression.
Because he's selling that rage of that element that you could do without in the film, the revenge aspect of it. But he's selling that moment with that reaction of anguish. I know I shouldn't be doing this. I know you wouldn't agree with it. Like he's angry, but he's also torn and regretful of it because there's a
range there.
Yeah, and it's pretty incredible. And so then Mr. Han says O'Hara's treachery has disgraced us, and he excuses himself. And then everybody, they kind of call it quits for the day. And then Mr. Roper's girl goes to Williams and says, excuse me, Han wants you to see him in his office, meet him in his office. And so he's like, all right, hey, Roper, I'll catch you later. I'll be right back. And so
sad.
We have one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Why is this your favorite scene?
Because just the dialogue. So
yeah.
He goes in, Jim Kelly goes to Han's office, and Mr. Han, he commends him on his performance of the day. Your fighting style is extraordinary and unorthodox. And Jim Kelly's like, yeah, I know. And he says, winning is something that we are born like to be great or whatever. He said it's defeat and dying that we must learn to cope with or to learn. And then Jim Kelly goes, I don't waste my time. And, and Mr. Han, and he goes, Mr. Han goes, oh, he's like, when it comes, I won't even notice. And he goes, oh, why not? He's like, I'll be too busy looking good. And then Mr. Han said, he cuts the shit and he's like, hey, what were you doing outside last night? And he goes, look, I was outside, but I wasn't the only one. And then Mr. Han is like basically saying, look, tell me what you were looking for. And Mr. Williams is like, look, I don't like your tone. Suddenly, I like to leave your island. And then Mr. Han goes, I'm afraid that won't be possible. And Jim Kelly goes, bullshit, Mr. Handman. and for whatever reason, that's always been funny to me because I'm like, all right, is he saying bullshit, Mr. Handman, because he's just mispronouncing Han, or is he dogging on him because he only has one hand? But he doesn't know he has one hand yet. So like that's always funny to me. That's my own little running joke in my head. Like he's talking about him having one hand, but he doesn't know. So anyway, Mr. Han's goons come in the office. They rush the office and they surround Jim Kelly. And then he goes, "Man, you come right out of a comic book." He strikes his pose and he starts kicking ass. And then they have a fight scene. And then
that fight scene's wild.
It is.
To me, it's a real bummer because I love Jim Kelly.
Oh,
and I always forget when I watch this movie that he goes out this early.
Yeah.
I keep thinking he's down there in the sub basement with Saxon and Lee, but he doesn't make it there. And in this fight, there's like this pigeon that flies right into Jim Kelly's face at one point.
Yeah.
And I love that moment. This distraction of this bird in his head.
Because it leads to him getting punched through that wall where the women are high on the opium or whatever, the heroin or whatever, and then that's where he gets beat. But that's when you get the reveal of Mr. Han. He takes that glove off and he's got that metal hand.
Yeah.
Mr. Handman! So then we have the scene with Han and Mr. Roper.
And Han's taking Roper through his trophy room.
Yes.
It's this very James Bond villain set.
I was going to say, you spoke about that earlier, and I'm thinking about this particular scene right here. Like, Mr. Han is an awesome James Bond villain.
Oh, yeah.
Like an awesome James Bond villain, yeah.
Dr. No's got, nothing on Han.
No.
And, in the foreground, there's like a series of weapon hands. And we've now seen his like metal prosthesis, but as we're passing by, we see the Wolverine claw that he uses at the end of the movie. Mm-hmm. Well, you also see this giant bird hand with like these razor claws on it.
A velociraptor or something?
Yeah, I was like, okay, I want to see the movie where he uses that. There's like a bear claw hand, and there's like a hand that's attached to a chain.
The fist. The little fist. Yeah.
But I want to see that velociraptor hand. Someone write a comic book,
please,
where Han uses that.
Right.
And he's trying to woo Roper, John Saxon, to his side. He wants Roper to be his American agent. Mm-hmm. But before, you agree to this, you got to know the realities of my world.
Yeah.
And by the way, take a look at your buddy over here, and he has Jim Kelly chained up above this pool.
And that's an awesome shot with John Saxon's reaction to that. Like I love that moment with him because he's smart enough to know, okay, I'm gonna freak the fuck out because that's my buddy hanging up right there. But I know where I am right now, and I know who I'm standing next to, so I got to play this shit cool.
And actually, before the reveal of the corpse of Jim Kelly, you have this scene where Han shows Roper the guillotine, like the centerpiece of his collection.
Yeah.
And he says, he motions to like put your head there. And he's like, oh, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
And then Han takes his Bond villain kitty cat and puts it underneath the guillotine. Mm-hmm. And Saxon's like, well, he does not approve of that. So he pulls the cat away from the guillotine. And Han says, well, now I know what lengths you won't go. Yeah. And he pulls the handle of the guillotine, and it's an elevator that takes him down.
And I love Roper faked out again.
Yeah.
I love that moment. It makes me laugh so much. Faked out again. He shakes his head as it's going down. But I like that moment where so what they're also doing is they're setting up geography of where the last part of this movie is going to take place. So he takes him down the lower level. You see that communications room. You see the cells where the islanders, the locals, are being held.
The drunks, the refuse.
Right.
Ugh.
Yeah, you see them there. You see the vat where they're producing all of that stuff, and where that one epic scene is going to take place when Bruce Lee gets that freaking staff and the nunchucks. So they're really, I really appreciated that this go around, seeing them set up the latter part of the film where it would take place. So after this, he shows him all this to Roper. Roper says, "You know what? We don't have a misunderstanding. I'm clear on what's going on." But you can tell that, you know, he's like, "You know what? I can't. I got to figure out my way out of this shit."
Yeah, that he's not on Team
board.
Han.
Yeah, and so the next scene is Bruce Lee's next night out. Okay, he made it to the entrance of the underground lair, but he had to leave because his cover was about to get blown. So this time he's going in like full-fledged. So he's going to try to get to the radio room that they established during Roper's tour, and he's going to call for the British embassy, like, "Hey, look, you know, come and get me, or this is what I got here." So when he makes his way in there, he's like all black, track suited up, ninja'd out or whatever. So something happens. So when he gets to this, there's a cobra that he commandeers and puts in a bag, and he lets it loose in the radio room. And the two guys in the radio room freak the hell out, throw a chair through the window, and they dive out. And Bruce Lee's just sitting there waiting for them to leave, and he makes his way in there.
And that's another, like, fighting without fighting moment.
Fighting without fighting. But one thing struck me, once he got on that radio, and when he's sneaking through there, even to get to that point and got on the radio, I'm like, man, like, Bruce Lee's a spy. Like, that guy recruited him in the beginning to do some spy work. And, like, right now, he's sneaking in, he's scoping the layout, he's delivering intel. And I just got bummed out, like, fuck, man, like, what if? Like, only what if? Like, if he were still alive, to get outside of doing strictly martial arts, but do, like, spy James Bond, full-fledged, like, other things outside of what we've been seeing. And to see him have elements, because we've never seen his character do this type of stuff, even on this level, in his other films. So it was one of those things that it just made me, it was like bittersweet, like, man, like, just what if? And so he sets off an alarm using that radio. He makes his way, like, all the guards start coming, and then an epic. You see, here's the thing. Yes, that fight scene in Fist of Fury when he's Bruce Lee against everyone in that dojo, that is still one of the greatest fight scenes ever. But the other night, watching this sequence from when he jumps out of that radio room to fighting those guys, it's a pretty decent amount of time before he gets locked in that one little.
There has been slow motion used in previous Bruce Lee films, but very brief moments.
Sparingly, yeah.
Yeah, sparingly. Watching this fight in Enter the Dragon, you realize that Bruce Lee was born to fight in slow motion. You know, yes, I agree with you, Darren. The speed at which he attacks Bob Wall is insanely impressive, and unlike a lot of other experiences that you see in other action films. But there is something high art about watching Bruce Lee in slow motion attacking these faceless goons.
You know what it is? Because in any other film in cinema, maybe before, but definitely after Bruce Lee, when slow motion is used in a fight sequence, it is used to show a punch being thrown and connecting. It is used to show a kick being thrown and landed, or somebody reacting to being punched or kicked. Just that's it. Somebody throwing a punch, the punch hitting somebody's face in slow motion, and then flying back in slow motion. When Bruce Lee used slow motion in Way of the Dragon at the end when he's fighting Chuck Norris, and also in Enter the Dragon in this sequence under the ground, he's not just using slow motion to show a punch. He's using slow motion to slow down so you can see technique. You see how he's knocking away, deflecting a kick, and then how he's blocking, and while blocking, throwing a punch to the solar plex or jab. You see how he is, blocking attacks from behind. He's using slow motion to showcase not the impact or the end result of technique, but the technique in general and how it can be used in conjunction with other techniques. So for me, I think that is special, and that also elevates his use of slow motion, because you see the reality. What we talk about in this whole series and what Bruce Lee was trying to show was the reality of the fight, the martial arts. This is how you would really fight. And so I'm gonna slow this down so you can see if a guy throws a straight punch at you, you raise your right hand, use the back of your palm and wrist to block and deflect and move it to the left, and then you come with your hand and you hit to the exposed rib cage area. He's showing you that. Like those diagrams in his book, that's on display right there in that sequence in Enter the Dragon. That's fucking badass. And then it just looks dope because you're just like, oh man, he is just too ripped. I have no chance in the gym.
And the way that his battle cries are also sold in slow motion is awesome and wonderful.
And again, to see the expression on him slowed down so you can just get the full extent of, again, that battle cry, the physicality of it. And then he picks up 2 sticks. Some dude makes a mistake to brandish some nunchucks.
Yeah, well, so before the nunchucks come out, we talked about in Fist of Fury how in martial arts films you'll have one guy surrounded by 20 other dudes, and how in lesser films one guy attacks and then lets the other guy attack after him, and then there's a wait. No one ever just rushes.
Right.
And you get that rush in Fist of Fury. But at this moment in Enter the Dragon, Bruce Lee's getting the shit kicked out of him too. But he's not even like, he'll have a stick go right up against the back of his neck, and he reacts to it, but not in a pain. He rolls with those assaults. Physical contact is happening upon his body,
but he's using that to let him know the direction of an attacker, so he immediately responds with a retaliation, and he's dropping these dudes, and it's impressive. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, but to be able to show awareness, not using superhuman listening or sensing abilities, but like if the guy makes contact behind him, well, I know there's a guy in close proximity behind me, so I'm gonna adapt. I'm gonna be water. I'm gonna be flexible, and I'm gonna immediately use that to my advantage and strike in that direction. And that entire sequence is just an insane display of technique and talent, and it's just badass. And then he picks those sticks up, and that one dude, he's just like pummeling that guy, and that dude's just like, oh, just stop hitting me. It's just amazing. And then Jackie Chan runs up behind him, and he hits him and grabs him in the headlock, and he breaks his neck, and then the dude gifts Bruce Lee with some nunchucks because he just doesn't know better. And that is one of my favorite Bruce Lee nunchucking scenes in the basement of Enter the Dragon. I don't know why, but I just love that scene so much when he's...
And then Han starts to shut all the doors around him.
Yes.
And I love this scene because he's trapped, right? Mm-hmm. And he's totally at peace with that. He sits down, crosses his legs, puts the nunchucks over his shoulders, and he just waits because there's nothing he can do. So an opportunity will present itself, and it does.
That's such a small thing, but a big thing.
Yeah.
Like, speaks volumes about Bruce Lee and his philosophy and character in general. Even if you just didn't know Bruce Lee's philosophy, you got to go, well, that's just a bad motherfucker. He's not even panicking right now. He's just chilling.
Look, yeah, because he knows that Han will show up. Han's not going to. Yeah, Han's not just going to let him rot.
Yeah, yeah. So the next sequence we have both Bruce Lee and John Saxon being brought outside to answer and atone for their treachery or their infiltration of Han's compound, and that's when this is first when Roper hasn't yet turned or revealed his true self to Han, and Han says, I want you to prove yourself to me to make sure you're in this all the way, and I want you to kill Bruce Lee. And a part of me in the movie is like, you know what? I told you there's a line I won't go beyond, and this is that line. I'm not gonna kill Bruce Lee. That's like the movie. But me watching it, knowing Bruce Lee, to me it tickles me because it's on John Saxon's like, I can't beat this motherfucker. I'm not fighting Bruce Lee. No. Like, so every time that moment happens, I always laugh to myself because he's like, dude, he's going to kill me. So no. But anyway, Han says, well, I will find someone with whom you can fight.
Enter Bolo.
Yeah. And it's a pretty awesome fight. And this go around in the last episode, you mentioned that Bruce Lee. There was an episode of, I think it was Longstreet, when he was telling the guy, I have you in this position. Like, what do you do now?
You bite that dude.
You bite that dude. And that philosophy is displayed in Enter the Dragon.
John Saxon's got to bite Bolo.
Yeah.
And Bruce Lee would totally approve of that.
Yep. And then another Bruce Lee technique is used to fell Bolo Young in the nuts.
In the nuts.
So, yeah, I really enjoy that. This pisses Han off to no end. And that's when he's like, you know what? Everybody, just go get him, destroy him. And then all hell breaks loose.
And what I love about this scene is Saxon's left up top to deal with whatever happens up there.
Yeah.
And then Bruce Lee, it's Bruce Lee's movie, right? Yeah. So, Saxon and Lee might share a title card, but the entire film rests ultimately on Lee's character and Lee's actions. And the film thankfully follows Lee's character as the lead.
Yeah.
Going into this film, I was really concerned about Saxon taking too much of the show,
right?
And he really doesn't.
No.
I mean, he is a supporting player,
and he's good,
and he's good, and he's a pretty good fighter too.
I found myself really enjoying him this go around. So before Bruce Lee chases Han down below to leave Roper up top to deal with the ensuing melee, both of them are up top, and Bruce Lee and Han square off for the first time amidst all this chaos and fighting. And it is a bad-ass shot of the background. It's just white robes and fighters everywhere going, some in the middle ground and foreground in front of the camera. But Bruce Lee is just standing. He almost looks like a cardboard cutout. He is standing so like rigid and stoic. He has that 1,000-yard stare to Han. Him and Han they make eye contact. And like all this shit is going on around him, but Bruce Lee is just standing there solid. And like it is such a badass shot. And then Han puts that bear claw hand on. Fortunately, he didn't bring the Velociraptor out, but he put the bear claw hand on. And then he makes his he makes some swipes at Bruce Lee, cuts him on the face. They fight up top, and then Bruce Lee chases him down to the trophy room. Yeah,
and in the trophy room, that's where he says, you have offended my family.
That's when he first entered it.
Yeah,
yes,
and you have offended the Shaolin Temple.
Yeah,
and it's just like, it's going down.
This is a pretty big. Now, talking about all of the final boss fights of our journey through the ITMOD Spotlight with Bruce Lee's films. So the first film, we had the big boss fight at the end, which was nuts. Bruce Lee jamming his fingers into the guy, Fist of the North Star style. Fist of Fury, we had the Japanese guy kicking him out into the yard, that fight, and he had the sword at the ends. He's kind of cheating. Way of the Dragon, we have the Chuck Norris fight, which I don't know, like, that might still be my favorite, but it's a hard sell.
I mean, I love the Chuck Norris fight.
I do.
It's not the Han fight.
So the Han fight. So Han has now put on the kitchen knives. He took the bear claw off. Actually, the bear claw got knocked off. It got stuck in the wood. Bruce Lee elbowed it out of him. So he puts the kitchen knife hand on, and they square off in there. And that's when you get Bruce Lee getting a couple of swipes cut into his chest.
And you get the classic moment where Bruce Lee gets to taste his blood.
Yeah.
Has that ever been addressed? Why? Like, what Lee's fascination was with that moment where he gets wounded, licks his blood like no big deal?
I don't know that I've read anything from him why he does that. But for me, what you just said is what I took it as. Okay, I'm cut. I shed blood. Yep, this is me. Okay, so what? Let's go. And so, like, to show I got wounded, but it means nothing. I'm still able to fight, and I will carry on. Like, so it's not, I'm not gonna trip out about it. It's no big deal.
Because in some ways, Enter the Dragon is kind of a best of list.
It is, absolutely,
of Lee.
It is because again, this is our first introduction to Western audiences who may have not gotten these little bits that were in the previous films. Mm-hmm. So we're going to give you those things that you may have missed.
Right. So you have to have the nunchucks. Mm-hmm. You have to have the tasting of blood.
Yep.
You got to have the battle cries.
Yep. Yeah. Got to have somebody getting hit in the nuts.
Yep. A couple times.
Yeah.
Got to have some biting.
Yeah. So then the cool part about the Han fight is it has actually two stages. So we have the moment where he puts the knife hand on, cuts Bruce Lee a couple of times. They jump up in the air. They have a dueling jump kick fight.
Dude.
And then he comes down, and then he hits Han slashes him, and it pisses Bruce Lee off.
There is a kick at that moment.
So they have 2 flying kicks. The first time they jump in the air, Bruce Lee gets cut across the stomach. The second time they jump in the air, Bruce Lee's kick connects Han in the face. Han lands on the ground, and he's stunned. And as he's coming up, Bruce Lee walks around that trophy case and quickly, side kicks him.
It is the most savage kick I think I've ever seen in a movie, period. I did frame by frame it, and I was trying to figure out if that was a human or a dummy, and I cannot tell. If it's a human, if that one guy broke his arm when Bob Wall fell into him, this must have exploded his head.
Dude was obliterated.
Yeah.
No, it was in fact not a human.
Okay.
But because that effect is, man. But here's the thing, though. You just imagine that power applied to a person. Seriously, he kicked him in the side of his head, where his neck is. If you get kicked that hard, that fast,
dead.
Yeah, you're decapitated.
That's my favorite act of violence in the entire movie is this one kick. I watched it 3 or 4 times.
Me too. I love it. And the sound, whoosh! Oh my god!
And then Han, obviously he's stunned. So he stumbles up, and then Lee puts him in a headlock, and then slaps him with his foot. Does this backhanded slap, and it's the most insulting love tap after that savage beatdown.
Oh man! So then Han notices a nearby statue holding a spear, and he takes that and he makes some swipes at Bruce Lee, and that spear gets thrown in a wall. Turns out that wall is actually a hidden door. It spins around, taking you into the Hall of Mirrors.
Han flees into it. It's woo, 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 woo.
Yeah,
he wants to get out of there.
So we go into this Hall of Mirrors. And the opening of this conversation, we talked about the opening of the film and the score. Bruce Lee, that theme of Enter the Dragon, Bruce Lee's battle cry. So at the end of the film is bookended by another bit of music that I feel it just elevates this scene to a whole another level. Still very 70s, but it's this smooth, it's got this bass drum, doom, not bass drum, bass guitar, doom, 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 as he's sneaking his way through the Hall of Mirrors, which would go back to a bit of philosophy that monk, that the abbot, the priest, told him in the beginning of the film.
Well, he hears the voice of his master at this point, the voice of the abbot, and he says, "Destroy the image, and you will break your enemy."
Yeah, the the images are illusions, are but illusions, and like you said, destroy the image, and you reveal them true selves, and you can destroy them.
Bruce Lee just starts punching glass.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's so badass, right? And then all the mirrors are shattered, and then he can see clearly where Han is, and he delivers one powerful sidekick to him, and Han flies back on that spear that was stuck in the wall.
It's a Chekhov spear.
Yeah,
it's got to come back.
Yeah, it's pretty dope way to end Han. And so so Bruce Lee goes back up top, and he sees the aftermath of the melee. Apparently, John Saxon whooped everybody's ass.
Well, hold that thought. After Lee kills Han, and Han just becomes this ornament on the wall. The way Lee just passes his body, okay, it's done. Yeah. It's over.
It's over. Yeah.
And Lee is so dismissive of the corpse. Yeah. It's just
And then the way that shot, it's just on their rotating door, and then that sound effect. There was something about that always struck me. I love that. I love that moment. Yeah, he just walks out that's it.
So you're back up top.
Yeah.
Like, we've just watched, like, the most epic fight.
Yeah.
And the first thing we see when Lee steps outside is John Saxon. He's pretty tired. He's exhausted. He's winded. And you're just like, what was that story? Saxon's never given that moment.
Yeah.
Which, again, goes like, you didn't need your name next to Bruce Lee on that title card.
Right.
You're second string.
Yeah.
You don't even get your moment.
Yeah.
And then Saxon sees the madam that he was in love with. She's dead.
Yeah.
How did she die? I don't know.
Yeah. But I like that, though. I like that the air of mystery. Yeah.
Yeah. And you get Bruce Lee and John Saxon making eye contact, and you get the exchange of thumbs up. You know, Bruce Lee gives his thumbs up. Saxon gives his tired thumbs up.
Yeah.
Job well done.
And then the helicopter, the cavalry comes that Bruce Lee radioed an hour ago, and his reaction to that, like,
hashtag eye roll.
Yeah, like that's awesome. And then we end on a close up of Han's hand, like in the
little furry claw,
and dun dun dun, and then it goes off. Man, when those credits roll, this most recent watch, you know, knowing first of all the build up to watching this and watching the other films, and again the baggage of those discussions and how we're discussing them and how I feel about them now, and then the anticipation of this discussion. Like, when those credits roll, like, I clapped. I was like, man, this was an awesome watch. And Enter the Dragon is my favorite Bruce Lee film.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Easily.
It was so fun to watch.
And, you know, we said it last episode, but I am so thankful that we ended this series on Enter the Dragon and not Game of Death.
Oh, yeah. I did, on my disc, there's a ton of special features. There's a documentary called The Curse of the Dragon. There is Bruce Lee in his words, where it's that black and white discussion where he's talking about be water, and he's talking about the different philosophies of, you know, to be able to truly express yourself. Like, that's the difficult thing. So if you haven't watched them, I would suggest watching those. But one thing that stuck out to me this most recent watch, knowing that we were going to watch Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, starring Chris Christopherson and James Coburn, is that in Curse of the Dragon, they talk about Bruce Lee's death, and you see the footage that was exploitatively spliced into Game of Death, the film, but you see, like, the actual footage in the funeral. You see Hong Kong, like, thousands and thousands, at least 12,000 people on this one square block coming to mourn Bruce Lee, and then you see the pallbearers walking his casket out. James Coburn, Steve McQueen, Dan Inosanto, and like some other guy. Oh, the guy that plays he's always in Bruce Lee's films. He's the guy that plays, like, the cousin from
the Big Boss.
Yeah, like, there's a couple of guys being pallbearers, but James Coburn and Steve McQueen are the two guys flanking the front. And I just would remember, like, damn, that's right. Like, those were his students. And then James Coburn, as they're lowering his body into the ground, he's the one that speaks and throws the first flower on there. And I was like, shit. Yeah.
You know, just a few minutes ago, you were talking about, like, the what if of Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
And it's always weird when you have an actor or a musician die too young.
32, I think he was.
Yeah. Like, that's crazy. And again, only 5 films. Really, 4 films and a third of a film, maybe a fourth of a film.
Yeah.
You know, what would Lee's career have been after a fully completed Game of Death? Reading about how, you know, he came to the United States originally to show that Kung Fu was a valid form of martial arts, equal to, if not better than, Taekwondo and Karate, the more popular art forms in the United States. That while he was here, he then crafted Jeet Kune Do, and then decided that technique had possessed him and he had to shed technique, and he closed his 3 schools down, was no longer going to teach, he was going to look inward, was going to take the art form to Hollywood, into television and movies, and didn't find the success right away in America, went back to Hong Kong, made The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, Way of the Dragon, Game of Death, Enter the Dragon. So I was thinking there's a path where he continued to make movies and made some awesome movies, completed Game of Death. I feel like Game of Death would have been his epic.
Yeah.
I certainly want that to be true.
Yeah.
And I think about him closing those schools down, and I wonder, would he have continued in Hollywood? Would he have retreated, and would he have gone back inward again? Would he have accomplished what he wanted to do and really focused on, his books, his teachings? I don't know.
I think...
Would he have found another way?
I think so. Jeet Kune Do still, just like even in his passing, his teachings and the martial instruction of Jeet Kune Do still lives on today by practitioners who studied under him. So really, I don't look at him closing those schools as, him stepping away from that. He planted those seeds so that, well, this version of what I want to get out can get out in this way. Other people go teach it.
Right.
I'm going to go to Hollywood because I understand that most people, there's only so many people who are going to make it out to San Francisco to be able to study in one of my schools. But if I make this movie, it's going to go to Hollywood. It's going to be in the West Coast, Midwest, the East Coast, the other side of the world. I'm going to get more exposure to the world with the things the philosophies that I would like to put out and to touch these people. So I'll be able to do it, and I have a wider reach. And I think that was one of the main reasons why he wanted to do film. So while I think what he wanted to put out to the world may have changed, he would have evolved to say, okay, I want to, because initially, like, he wanted to teach Kung Fu. Then that changed. I want to teach Jeet Kune Do, only because his learning and evolution and his understanding of what those things were, he surpassed certain levels and he gained higher learning and higher understanding. So I think that way of that thought process would have still continued, but it would have just been reflected in the types of movies that he made.
So you think he would still, he'd be a 77-year-old still in the film industry,
directing movies, because now he can, now I have a better understanding of what I want to say, but how I want to show it. I see these other people who have a grasp of what I want to say. I can use them to be the actors now, and I can be behind the cameras. So I think, and the crazy part is, if you look at his short filmography and how that affected the landscape of filmmaking, actors and action stars with just his short time here, you have to understand and know that martial arts films and action heroes, how we know them now, if he were still alive, would be probably nothing like what we have. Like, what's the norm now? The stock type of hero, the stock type of action, the type of posturing, like all of that shit would probably be so radically different, because as someone like Michael Jackson or Bruce Lee or Prince, like, you dictate how the culture moves forward. Like when rock and roll comes out, if someone is so in tune to it and they're groundbreaking and genre breaking, they dictate how moving forward that art form is people are inspired by that. It changes things change and grow based off of inspiration, and people try to be like you and mimic you. You spawn a whole new different generation of people who do things a certain way. You look at like Tarantino and the independent film movement. Well, once he comes, now film language and dialogue changes forever now. So Bruce Lee would have been the same way, in like how dialogue scenes are shot and filmed and people act in those scenes. Once Tarantino has his specific style injected into Hollywood, the same thing would have happened when Bruce Lee as a person, as a character, comes and then continues to grow. It's almost as like Tarantino's style just never stayed the same and just keeps evolving. Like Hollywood's going to keep evolving with it and taking from that and making everything be like that, because that's how we are now. Every movie is like the last movie. Everything is inspired by the last new it thing, the new wave, nouveau thing. And so action cinema and freaking heroes and kung fu heroes or whatever would have evolved with Bruce Lee. Everything would have been radically different by now, I think.
Well, that's the thing is, what's so exciting about Bruce Lee as a human is the evolution of self.
Yeah.
And him dying at 32 and being robbed of further evolution.
Yeah.
I mean, really, to me, he was never contained in one box.
No.
Right? And I feel like he's more than just his films. He's more than just filmmaking. He could have gone anywhere, is what I'm saying. Who knows what he would have done?
Yeah.
He could have done anything.
Yeah. I think he would have. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the crazy part. And that's the sad part. Like, he would have, he would have gone on to do films, but yeah, he probably would have gone on to teach at a university somewhere. Like, oh my God, like that. Okay, yeah, Bruce Lee does films. He's still alive today. He's 60, 70 years old. Imagine what films would be. Imagine what people would be as a society if he's somewhere, literally, people are literally getting from him his philosophies in the world. You're meeting someone like that. You're taking that encounter with that person home with you and sharing it with your brother, your sister, and then it just ripples out. Like, just imagine if he were still alive to actually teach somewhere, like to speak, be a speaker at a university or whatever, a professor. Like, it just would have been, it's just mind-boggling, like the potential that had.
So, like, right, absolutely, because he has become a symbol.
Mm-hmm.
And this story I first heard on the Bruce Lee podcast hosted by his daughter, where in 2005, when in Bosnia and Herzegovina, the city of Mostar, a ethnically divided city, turmoil, bloodshed, just brother hating brother. When they wanted to erect a statue in that city for unity, they chose Bruce Lee as the symbol of unity. And so, like, again, he was on this planet for a very short period of time, and he had an even more limited window to touch all these people. Here, in the United States, he died before I was ever alive, and here we are talking about him, and he's affecting my life right now, and his teachings, and I want to keep on going, right? And here are these people in Bosnia. Here is an artist in Bosnia, and he wants to bring the people together, and to do that, they use the image of Bruce Lee. That's not just an action hero.
Exactly.
That's not Stallone,
And that's what I said from the beginning. He was so much more than just an action star, a kung fu master. Like, that's why he is my favorite nonfiction, my favorite person, like, ever, because he was so much more than that. Think about that. Like, that's insane. Like, that is.
This happens in 2005.
Yeah, there's a country, I think in Malaysia, there's some place in Malaysia that, same thing, they worship him. They think he's still alive. Like, they have a religion. He's a religion. Like, this guy on the screen, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Steven Seagal. Like, what the hell? Yeah. Like, that is extremely impressive. And it just speaks volumes about the type of person he was and the life that he lived. To be able to do that, to have that much reach in such a short period of time. And that's why I will always find him infinitely fascinating, because again, as many movies as we consume, myself specifically, on a day-to-day basis throughout my life, and I plan to my last day here, I still, to this point, don't know of another person like that in film. He's just wholly unique. He's just wholly unique, and I will always appreciate that. Like, I will always appreciate that. Yeah, fucking Bruce Lee, man.
I mean, this has been a really wild ride. I'm going to cherish, and I'm looking forward to revisiting our episodes.
Yeah.
I stopped myself today because I was going to listen to our first episode before you came over.
Yeah.
And I stopped myself because I want to wait until this episode is available so I can listen to it in a series, because I feel like I've gone through a very complete arc in my introduction or reintroduction to Bruce Lee as an actor and then as a person and as a teacher. And I feel like this is just the beginning. You know, we're going to conclude this episode and go about our days, and we're going to record other episodes. But, you know, I've bought the Tao of the Jeet Kune Do. I'm going to read that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm looking forward to revisiting these films, and I'm looking forward to continuing my journey with the Bruce Lee podcast and Shannon Lee and Sharon Lee. I don't know. This has been special.
It has. And yes, and Bruce Lee was and is amazing. But as equally as amazing, you got to think about it, is the vessel in which we received him is cinema. Like, movies, a movie star, like, affected our lives. That's why one of the things that we hold so near and dear to us and magical about movies to us is that, you know, for a lot of people, it's just, I got 2 hours to kill, what's playing, just give me a ticket to that or whatever. But to other people, you know, movies can take on such a much more deeper meaning and experience. And this is one of those things. This is one of those reasons why. This is one of those examples. Like we got introduced to him. He's affected us, and we met him through the movie screen. And so that makes it even more awesome. You know, those two things I love. I love movies, and I love Bruce Lee. And to have those two coexist together and be one and the same, like, I really dig that. And I had so much fun doing this series, man. This was so much fun.
I don't want to stop talking because then it's done.
Yeah.
You know, 6-week series. I really have to thank you, Darren, for coming up with this idea, encouraging me to join you on the conversation. And I hope the listeners out there have enjoyed our ITMOD Spotlight series. And I look forward to other subjects, certainly, but this is going to be a tough act to follow.
Yeah. If you did enjoy the series, and if you are curious more about Bruce Lee and some of his books, I highly encourage you to seek them out. There are multiple books that he has written, like the one Brad just mentioned, The Tao of Jeet Kune Do. There are books that are written about him that explore him and his person and his life more in depth, as well as there are several documentaries. I would say it would do one well to seek him out and learn more about him other than his on-screen personas, because if you've taken nothing else away from this series, my goal was to show Brad and everyone else that there was so much more to him than the characters that he portrayed in the film. And I think it'd be a shame if that was not relayed to our audience. And so hopefully you all can take something from him and what you learn about him and his philosophies, and apply them to your day-to-day lives and enrich your lives, because he was just all positive. He was just so positive. And the world now more than ever could use a little more than a little bit of that. So, yeah, that's going to do it for us. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you, Darren.
Be water, my friend.
I will try.
You can follow the podcast at ITMODcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can follow Turtle Dork at the Turtle Dork on Twitter, at the Turtle Dork 1 on Instagram, and Brian William Young on Facebook. Wife Dork is at Sidewalk Siren on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Brad Gullickson is at Mouth Dork on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Letterboxd, and Untapped. And I'm Darren Smith, the Disco Dork, on all social medias. Be on the lookout for our Fistful of Michael Bay watching, or is it Bay watching? Yeah, Fistful of Bay watching on Friday. Also, the Turtle Dork is finally hosting his film at the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester on Sunday. May 28th. He is hosting The Gray at 5 p.m. Tickets are still on sale for that.
$7.
$7. Can't beat that. Also, come out wearing your best Wolf t-shirt or garment and be in the contest for whoever has the best will get a $50 Alamo Drafthouse gift card. So that's cool.
Also, if you show up and you're dressed like Bruce Lee, I'll give you a $25 gift card on top of it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And I'll give you a $25 gift card. So that's $100 if you dressed up like Bruce Lee and you reference this particular episode. So, yeah. And I mean that. We put it on air, so we have to live up to it. So that's going to do it for us. Thank you all for listening. Stay tuned for more ITMOD content. We got a lot of stuff coming, so we're excited about that. So be on the lookout. But that's going to do it for us. Thank you all for listening. And until next time.